Hi, my name is Jordan Mims, and this is my presentation on variable practice. If you'd like to take a second and get your laptop synced up to the PowerPoint with mine, that'd be fine. Okay, let's get going. So what is variable practice? At its core, variable practice is the practice of a skill in a mixed order. A variable practice may keep the skill the same, but vary how the skill is executed. An example of this could be something like shooting a basketball. A variable practice would take the simple skill and add some kind of flair to it. This could be shooting the basketball from 4 different spots on the court with a pattern alternating from spots. The pattern could be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter as long as it follows an alternating pattern. The key to variable practice is quite simply just adding variation to the movements. So potential forms of variation. There are multiple different things that a coach or teacher can change to alter the practice and add variation. The variations that can be changed include a range of things such as speed, distance, or target. Those aren't the only 3, but those are the main 3 we're going to be focusing on in this presentation. If using the basketball example, each of these would look like this. Speed, alternating speeds in a sequence of layups, switching between slow speed, a max speed, and then to a medium pace. Distance, changing the distance between each attempt at a shot. Take 1 shot, take 2 steps back, take another shot, take 2 more steps back, take 1 final shot, and then go back to the starting position and repeat the process. Target, a passing drill where 4 team members are lined up and 1 team member is standing a short distance in front of them. The single person will then alternate passing between the 4 teammates in a pattern of the coach or the teacher's choice. It could be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 3, 2, 4, or anything along those lines, really. It's up to you. So variable versus constant. On the other end of the spectrum, we have constant practice. Constant practice is different from variable practice because it does not offer any alterations to the skill. If you had the same basketball example with a shooting practice, the positioning would stay the same throughout. Instead of an alternating 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern, it would be something like 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, or 4, 4, 4, 4. But it would never add variation to that. While both practices have their merits, it is very dependent on what the activity is when deciding which one you want to pick. Constant practice works better when it comes to a very specific special skill, like gymnastics or weightlifting, while variable practice works better on skills with more carryover potential to other skills, like dribbling a basketball and then going into a layup with it. Benefits of variable practice. It always allows opportunity for adaptation. It allows the practitioner to develop a schema for how to approach the practice. It allows practitioner to explore variations of the skill that closer mimics real game scenarios. i.e., this could be something like having to shoot a basket from the side instead of lining up perfectly every shot in the middle. So drawbacks of variable practice. It's often more fatiguing than constant practice of skills as you're doing more movements per set. You have a possibility of a negative transference skill, and constant variation might not present the practitioner with enough time to practice the basic skills they're trying to get better at to begin with. Variable practice in children, tennis study. So I found a tennis study that went through and explained how this affected different students in different age brackets. It's widely believed that variable practice is better than other forms of practice when it comes to children. A study was done by the University of Athens to see if this was really the case or not. They studied this by monitoring the forehand drive in tennis. For the study, they gathered 40 students in an age range of 9 to 10, and then 40 students in the age range of 18 to 19. And these students were then split into subgroups based on the type or the amount of variation they wanted to present. They achieved variation in the study by adding different targets that practitioners needed to alternate between, and by changing distances between practitioners and the targets. So by the end of the study, they found that the younger group responded better to variable practice than the other forms, and that they responded better to variable practice than the young adults did. Basically ensuring that variable practice is more effective than something like constant practice. So PE application. I think the idea of variable practice can blend into the physical education environment pretty well. The idea of variating a skill works well with the idea of PE activities. This concept would most likely work the best in an elementary school setting than it would in a high school environment or even a middle school, as the younger students were shown better in that study to respond to this kind of practice. Even though superiority in older groups of children is more consistent, it will not be detrimental to the practice of a skill, and in some cases could help to eliminate repetitiveness. Variable practice can be applied to any of the more sports-based curriculum models. However, it could still have its own place in a fitness education model if given the opportunity. Take for example, a running unit. This is something that could very quickly start to feel repetitive and boring for the students. And if they're bored, they're not going to be participating as much as you would like them to. With a few alterations, the idea of a variable practice could spice things up. Instead of having students practicing the same distance run over and over and over again, you could change their speed and add something like sprint intervals into the lesson, or even change of direction work and have them move in a pattern of forward, left, right, forward, instead of just, forward, forward, and more forward. So variable practice in basketball. So we have a video example. So what you need to do is you're going to highlight over the hyperlink. That's this video example. You're going to click and you're going to go to the thing that says hyperlink. Then you're going to open the hyperlink. It's going to take us to the video. I will give you a second to get there. And then we're going to watch the video. All right, so let's talk about what we just saw. What we see here is a basketball practice drill using the idea of variable practice. Instead of just keeping the athlete prone to one spot of the court, the coach has him shooting from 7 different spots. Something like this could be an efficient or an effective way to implement this style into PE class. Say you have an activity during a basketball unit where your class is split into even teams depending on your number of basketball hoops. You could assign point values to each shot. Sorry, technical. You could assign point values to each shot and allow the entire team a run through of the drill. You then could make a score-based elimination game where the team with the least amount of points per round is knocked off the bracket, and then would start participating in some form of alternative assignment, That assignment doesn't have to relate to variable practice, but you do want to keep the students active even if they're not playing this basketball doodle game. This is a way for your class to begin practicing more specific game type scenarios and is a good stepping stone between a closed and open practice. So how would I use it? As mentioned earlier, I would use it for any kind of sports-based lesson or even some fitness-based lessons. I want to use the next few slides to be a little more specific on how I would go about doing that. So in an elementary and middle school setting, I would incorporate variable practice towards the beginning of a unit that focuses on some specific sport. I would have the students partaking in activities that resemble drills that coaches would play. However, I would add game-like elements to these drills to make them more entertaining for the students. For example, let's say we've just started a unit on Ultimate Frisbee. An initial activity for something like this would involve Frisbee throws onto a destination. The destination could be marked by hula hoops. To spice up the activity, we could change up variables such as the shapes of the hula hoop targets, or even something like the distance between the spot where you throw the Frisbee and the hula hoops. After a few activities like this, incorporating variable practice elements, I would start pushing the students toward a more game-like scenario, and then ideally into a real game. For the elementary age students, I realized we would likely need more time to develop the basic skills and would not be able to fully participate in a real game. But the middle school students would be more likely to develop and be able to handle full gameplay. So continuing on how I would use it, since most high schools are leaning towards the fitness education model of instruction, we need to figure out a way to insert variable practice into that model. So let's look at my running example from earlier. A unit on running perfectly fits into the fitness for life concept that's being pushed around a lot. We just run into the problem that most high schoolers might be discouraged at the idea of just doing distance running for an entire class period or an entire unit. You know, this isn't cross-country club, this isn't what they're used to. By adding variable practice elements into running, we can not only accomplish our goal or skill of fitness development, but we can also make things a bit more interesting. So activities following the ideas of variable practice here could be shuttle work, running to one object, changing direction, then running back, or even something like a tempo run. So here's my sample day with variable practice. Next, we're gonna look at a sample day of lessons that coordinates with variable practice. The lesson follows a 6th grade class that has just started a unit on Ultimate Frisbee. The activities below would follow a day that focuses on accurately throwing a Frisbee to a target, be it target is not a person or it could be the passing. The equipment required for the lesson is as follows. You're gonna need multiple Frisbees, an open area. This can be a field or track or even inside the gym if you don't have access to that. You're gonna need hula hoops and cones. So activity 1 will take approximately 10 minutes of our 20-minute lesson. So it's called Target Range Frisbee. For this activity, we'll need access to a wide open area. As mentioned earlier, this is preferably a field outside, or if it's not available in the gym is fine too. We will need multiple Frisbees, hula hoops, and cones. To set up, we will make 4 even groups out of the students. Each group will then be given 6 hula hoops to make a unique shape out of. Each group will then line up with at the cone a set distance behind their shapes and proceed to try and land their Frisbee into the shapes for points. Students will then alternate target ranges, as we're going to call them, every 2 minutes. This allows them to go through each range once and use their own range twice. So modifications. Modifications for this would be something like shortening the distance between where you throw the Frisbee to your targets, and then an extension would look like extending the distance between the throwing point to the targets. So activity 1 continued. In the activity, we have variable practice in a few different ways. Mainly this is achieved by alternating the shapes of the targets with hula hoops. The other way is by alternating the distance between the hula hoops and target. Both of these offer a variation of the basic frisbee throw, so the practitioner can and will be able to develop their skill with that. So activity 2 will take up the second 10 minutes of our lesson plan and bring us to an even 20. So this game is called Island Vacation. So to play Island Vacation, we will need a couple things. We will need hula hoops for every student. We're gonna call them their islands. And then multiple frisbees, which we're gonna call their planes. So students will take their hula hoops into a field or gym and pick a spot for their island. Once every student is up, once every student is set up, the teacher will give a certain students a frisbee, or as we're calling them, planes. Students will then pass the frisbee to each other. However, they have to catch it inside of their island. They are not allowed to step out of the hula hoop at all for any reason until a set point in the game. So once a pair of students makes a successful pass, they will switch hula hoops. That's the only time they're allowed to leave their hoop. Or in game terms, they will fly a plane into each other's islands. The game will continue this rotation for the entirety of the 10 minutes, and students are encouraged to actually name their islands and to keep a travel log of all the islands that they've been to, just to make things a little more creative and fun. So modifications for this would be shortening the range between islands, or letting students even take a step outside of their island to catch a frisbee. I've envisioned that maybe they'd be allowed to have 1 foot out of the island, but they'd have to keep 1 foot inside of their hula hoop. So extensions would be extending the range between the islands, or having students catch the frisbee with only one hand. It doesn't have to be only one hand, it just has to be some kind of alternative catching. So be it only the left hand, only the right hand, maybe they have to sandwich it. It's really up to you at that point, but the key is to make the catch harder. So activity 2 continued. Activity 2 makes you forget that you're partaking in a variable practice. The entirety of the game is just passing a frisbee at different ranges. The modification of distance is one of the variables that we focus on implementing throughout our entire presentation here. So it fits in perfectly with our variable practice. Students don't always need to know that they're practicing for them to get the benefits from practicing. Sometimes they're going to be more efficient if they don't know that they're actually just partaking in a practice. So in summary, variable practice can be an effective method for teaching a student or practitioner a new skill. While it is most effective with younger students, it can and very well can still work for older students. So variable practice is a welcome addition to skill training for any sport, really, and is even helpful for things you would not initially think of or come up with. This could be your running, your weightlifting, or your gymnastics still, even though constant might be better for those two. Other practice types like constant do have their place, like I just said with gymnastics or weightlifting, but a variable practice is still capable of not only developing skill, but it is also capable of keeping things interesting, which if they're not having fun, is your lesson really effective? That brings us to the end of the PowerPoint with our sources. I took 2 different sources for this. One is the study, and the other is just simply a chart that has some differences between various types of practice. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. My name's Jordan Mims, and this was variable practice.